Hey, in this video, I want to talk about the basics of life insurance, why buy it, and how much to buy. I just want to hone in on the reasons why people might want to purchase life insurance. Because, as you know, life insurance is just a simple contractual deal that you make with an insurance company. You say, hey, I want to buy a specified amount of death benefit that will pay my beneficiaries upon my death, either some lump sum or a series of payments. Now, why do I want to give my loved ones money? I mean, not just to make them rich. I'm, in theory, hoping to accomplish some financial goal. Usually, it's because of premature death. We're planning, hopefully, if everything goes well, I'll live a super long life and I'll outlive my need for life insurance. But if I die before I fulfill my financial obligations, either to my spouse, to my kids, maybe to my parents, whoever I have an obligation to financially. Maybe I have a sibling who's disabled and I want to make sure they're always provided for. You might also consider buying life insurance to help pay estate taxes, because in theory, it's less expensive to use discounted dollars via life insurance to cover estate taxes than it would be to just use a dollar from my estate to pay estate taxes. You'll learn all about that during our estate tax class. You might also want to use life insurance to deal with blended families. Sometimes it's just cleaner to use a life insurance policy to cover your estate goals for giving to your maybe to your extended family or to your kids. Life is messy, and sometimes it's just cleaner to just say, look, I'm going to make sure that the kids from my prior marriage always get a certain amount. Let's say you want to leave each of them $1 million. Wouldn't that be nice? And then my current spouse and kids will just deal with my current estate. So equalizing estate. You might also want to buy life insurance for business purposes. Like if you've got a partner that you're in business with and you want to make sure that if something happens to your partner, that you don't end up in business with your partner's spouse. So you structure a buy-sell agreement and you fund it with life insurance. And that agreement says that if either of you dies, that the life insurance proceeds that get paid out will buy out the deceased person's spouse, and that the surviving owner will be the 100% owner. So it's another good reason for life insurance that we're not going to go into beyond that explanation. You might have to buy life insurance to secure a debt. Somebody doesn't want to loan you money unless you buy life insurance. And then maybe you're single, you don't have anybody relying on you financially, or maybe you're not single and you've got, a spouse and kids, but you're just hoping to add a little extra to your estate to fund a charitable gift without taking anything away from your loved ones. But most people buy life insurance to cover their unfulfilled financial obligations. Now, there are 4 costs associated with premature death. The first one is a little harsh: the human life value, as determined by the amount of money you make, which sounds horrible, but it's just one way of thinking about the cost of premature death. Stick with me on this. So if you expected to work another 30 years and you're currently on track to make $100,000 a year plus raises, you can calculate the present value of the loss of those future earnings. And that's usually one of the biggest costs associated with premature death. A smaller cost, but an important one to consider: final expenses, funeral, unpaid medical bills. If you die a spectacular death, it's really expensive. Maybe estate administration if you need to hire a lawyer or pay probate costs for assets that go through probate. Another cost is maybe if you're protecting your family against reductions in their standard of living. Another cost can be, grief, loss of parental figure. These are all of the things, by the way. If you ever lost somebody in a car accident, for example, and it was somebody else's fault, the court would argue, your lawyer would argue, that the defendant's insurance policy or their assets should pay you, the survivor, who's suffering as a result of the loss of this person who was killed due to the negligence of this defendant. All of these things would be part of that claim that you'd be presenting. So not so dissimilar. Anyways, so the economic justification for life insurance exists if others are relying on your income or your services. So let's say you're not working and earning money, but you are providing services in the home. If you're the stay-at-home parent, for example, there's a value to the services that you're providing. If you're helping your parents by just going over there, taking them meals, maintaining their house, you're pretty much keeping them out of a long-term care facility, those are services you're offering that are valuable and would be another part of the reason why you might want to purchase life insurance. So the financial impact is really going to vary depending upon your family situation. If what we're primarily focused on is buying life insurance to cover the cost of premature death, we're not thinking about all of these other things necessarily. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap. But in terms of financial impact, it's a little different if you are single with no dependents. It doesn't mean that you don't need any life insurance, because maybe you want to have enough life insurance to pay off a student loan that your parents co-signed with you. Or maybe you want to provide enough to cover final expenses. Maybe you planned to support your parents later in life and you want to leave them a little bit. I don't know why I'm so focused on your parents, but anyhow, single, no dependents, you might have other things that you want to do, including maybe give a gift to charity. Single with no dependents might be the lowest expected life insurance need, but not necessarily zero. Everybody else has somebody relying on them on this chart. We've got people who are single parents who have special needs as they think about who's going to take care of their kids if there isn't another available parent to help with that work. How do we provide ongoing support? How do we calculate the support that they would need? College costs, etc. Another, situation that comes up commonly where we've got sandwiched people who, if the worker dies and their parents were benefiting as well as their kids were benefiting from the services provided by the worker, whether financially or otherwise, that can create different needs. Partners with no dependents. So kids aren't the only source of financial obligations. You might also have a partner who has, maybe they're in school still and you're working and you've made financial commitments together. Maybe you bought a house together. Maybe you've developed a lifestyle together, whether you're single, whether you're like married or not. But if you're living as financial partners and you're relying on each other, you might want to provide some life insurance to your survivor to make sure that they can continue to live the lifestyle that you've developed together. And then, of course, all of these other situations are just a riff on those things. So partners with dependents, sandwiched partners, blended partners. So it's maybe you and your current family plus your former family. And then all of that, maybe you've got a parent on top of it. And this is, it's the norm. It is the norm for things to get messy. So all of these family units have very different needs. So how do we calculate their needs? There's a very rough estimate that is available, and you would only use it if you had like less than 10 minutes to calculate something. In fact, I would say if you had 10 minutes, you could do a better job than this. But the human life value approach to calculating life insurance needs is about as crude as it gets, because all it's considering is the decedent's income and the amount of income that they were contributing to the family. And it begins by estimating that person's average annual earnings over their productive life. And when we say productive life, we mean to the age that they were planning to retire. So if they are 35 today and they plan to work to 65, you're looking at their average annual earnings over the next 30 years. And then we take from that the money that was never going to be available to the family, the federal and state tax, FICA tax, life and health insurance premiums, and any self-maintenance, haircuts, tennis shoes, video games, etc. What remains is the family's share of earnings. So that family share of earnings becomes the important factor in determining the amount of money needed times the number of years from now until the time that person would have retired. And then you use a reasonable discount rate, this is where people usually stumble, to calculate the present value of the family's share of earnings. Let's just do an example. You have Richard, who's 27, married with 2 kids. He grosses, and gross means before tax, and he plans to work 40 more years with no raises, which is a simplified version of this calculation. Of the $50,000 worth of gross income, $20,000 goes towards taxes, insurance, and his personal needs, which leaves $30,000 to support his family. If a discount rate of 5% is used, when we say discount rate, we're saying, look, if you give me a big steaming pile of money today, what's a reasonable rate of return that I could achieve? And 5%, this is a reasonable rate of return. If we were going to assume 0%, if we said he was going to a discount rate of 0%, then all we would need to do is multiply 30,000 times 40 years to get the number. But we're saying that would be stupid because you're not going to put the money under your mattress. You're not going to put it in a 0% savings account. You might put it into, you don't want something super risky, but 5% seems like it could reasonably achieve an average annual return of 5%. So let's push all of these numbers into a time value money calculation. And let's say a number of periods of 40 years, a discount rate, so the rate that I think I can safely achieve, 5%. Present value is what we're solving for. We're taking an annual payment or receiving an annual payment of $30,000 a year to get that support. And then the future value, we're saying we don't need any at the end. At the end of the 30 years, because we're doing just a human life value approach, and we solve for present value. What did you get? So let's make this our first question. If you were helping Richard calculate how much life insurance he needs using this method, what is the present value? What is the pile of money he would need to produce $30,000 a year of level payments with nothing left at the end? And if he produces it for 40 years and can achieve a 5% rate of return, assume that payment is going to come out at the beginning of the period, not at the end. All right, that's your first question. So now let's look at the needs approach. The needs approach is far superior. And let's just be clear, there are a lot of ways people calculate life insurance needs. I mean, so many ways. There's no one accepted way, but these two approaches are common. So the needs approach, well, let's go back. Let's just say, what are some of the issues with the human life value approach? Some of the issues include the fact that it completely ignores assets that the insured has. It ignores the value of Social Security benefits. It doesn't consider any kind of work differences. Earnings and expenses are assumed to be constant. It's not calculating raises. And it also ignores employee benefits and the cost of those benefits that the family, maybe the worker was carrying the benefits and now the family needs to purchase them. It doesn't consider the cost of educating kids. It ignores inflation on both income and expenses. Several shortcomings. Now let's look at a more robust calculation, and that's the needs approach, which considers a more tailored a set of variables when calculating what somebody might need for life insurance. And we start with the first thing that you encounter upon someone's passing, which is the cost to deal with their immediate death, their burial expenses, any uninsured medical bills, the cost of probate if you need to pay for an attorney to assist you with that. And then we also include some money to cover a readjustment period, which is usually a 1 to 2 year period after the breadwinner's death. And we're calling this person who died the breadwinner, but there might be two people working in that family. During that period, we want to make sure the family gets about the same amount. I mean, ideally that they get to maintain the same amount of household income so that people can sort of get their sea legs under them, maybe if they're going to have to move or make other changes. But we're not going to make them make any changes for 1 to 2 years. We just want them to be able to take their time to get settled. And then income during the dependency period goes beyond the readjustment period. This is while kids are still in the house. So once the youngest reaches 18, that in theory is the end of the dependency period. That of course would change if there was a disabled person in the household that needed support longer. And then any kind of income that's needed to the surviving spouse to cover the blackout period, which is the time between when the youngest leaves the house and when the surviving spouse is entitled to retirement benefits as a widow or widower. So there could be quite a long time period between these, and we want to make sure that we cover, and again, that's what's called the blackout period. We want to make sure we leave enough life insurance benefits to help fund that. Other things to consider would be if we have a mortgage that we want to pay off, it's smart to use life insurance to do that. If we want to pre-fund college education, if we want to get an emergency fund back up to where it should be, if there are any special needs, family members, as I mentioned, you might want to leave a separate fund to provide for them. And then I mentioned retirement needs, income to surviving spouse for blackout period and for retirement if necessary. So what might this look like? If we have a 55-year-old breadwinner with a 45-year-old spouse and a 10-year-old child, and this 55-year-old dies right here, for the first 2 years, we want to essentially provide, number one, an estate clearance fund to cover the funeral and administrative expenses, any unpaid medical bills, enough money to cover that first 2-year period during the readjustment with the exact same amount of income. And then we're thinking about income during the dependency period until that 10-year-old turns 18. So here we are at year 0 on the date of death. And then that kid would be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. And that would bring the end of the dependency period. As you know, there would be Social Security survivors benefits, which we are going to bring back into the equation to reduce how much income would be needed, because the needs approach calculates that, and we'll get to that in a moment. So income needed during the dependency period, and then the blackout period from that point until the spouse reaches age 60. So here we are at 45 for the spouse, 45 upon the death of the 55-year-old, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 60. So at age 60, the surviving spouse could claim Social Security survivor, Social Security widows or widowers benefits, and that might still not be enough. And so we've got to figure out how much more would that person need. So yes, we're covering the blackout period and then income to support that person from age 60 until their lifespan, if we assume that they're going to live to 90 or whatever age. So other special needs, we want to capture their mortgage and pay that off, education expense if we want to make sure that's pre-funded, emergency funds, caring for disabled dependents, etc. That's an overview of the needs approach. Oh, but what I owe you is, let's look at, on page 218, we have an illustration of this approach. And this worksheet walks you through everything we just talked about. So in this example, we've got Jennifer and Scott Smith, who are married and have a son who is 1 year old. Jennifer's 33. She earns $60,000 a year. Scott's 35, earns $45,000. And Jennifer wants her family to be financially secure if she dies prematurely. Normally, both Jennifer and Scott would be doing this math, but we're just going to do it for Jennifer for this example. So let's read a little bit more about what's going to go into this calculation. First of all, for cash needs, Jennifer says that her family is going to need at least $15,000 for the funeral. And even though she's got group health insurance, certain medical expenses are going to be excluded, and she's going to have to pay an additional deductible and coinsurance charge. So she wants to have $5,000 for uninsured medical expenses. And she's also making monthly payments on a car loan and credit card debts that total $12,000. And she estimates that the cost of probating her will and attorney fees will be $3,000. So we'll see that in a moment. Oh, well, let's just go to that. So that's our immediate cash needs in the estate. So here we have her funeral costs, her medical bills that she wants to make sure she's got coverage for, installment debts, and probate costs. Where no estate taxes are anticipated, so her total estate clearance fund in this situation is $35,000. Oops. All right, so let's go back down to this example. So for income needs, Jennifer also wants to provide monthly income to her family during the readjustment and dependency period until her son reaches 18. All right, he's 1 now, right? Jennifer and Scott's net take-home pay is approximately $6,000 each month. Jennifer believes that her family can maintain its present standard of living if it receives 75% of that amount, or $4,500 monthly. So she wants the family to receive $4,500 monthly for 17 years during the readjustment and dependency periods. Interesting. So the same amount during both the readjustment and dependency. If she's gone, she's saying, with just a raw income need will be $4,500. Because right now that $6,000 anticipates her current costs of she needs a car and car insurance, and she eats, and her share of vacation expenses and haircuts and whatnot. So the family's need for $4,500 per month is reduced if other sources of income are available. Scott's net take-home pay is $2,500 monthly. In addition, he and his son are eligible for, ding, 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 Social Security survivors benefits. Scott's benefits are payable until his son reaches 16, whereas his son's benefits are payable until 18. But Scott's working, and he's going to likely make too much to get any Social Security. Let's see what it says. In this example, we'll assume that only the son will receive Social Security survivor benefits because Scott's earnings exceed the maximum annual limit allowed under the Social Security earnings test. So he's not going to be able to. Sometimes if a spouse earns just a little bit, they can get that survivor's benefit for taking care of a kid. But if they make too much money, they're kicked out of that program. And so just the son will get that benefit. So the son is going to get an estimated $1,000 a month. So we've got Scott's net earnings of $2,500 Plus, the son is getting $1,000. Now we're up to $3,500 a month. So if their income goal is $4,500 a month, there's going to be a shortfall of $1,000. So her family's going to need an additional $24,000 to provide monthly income of $1,000 during the 2-year readjustment period, and another $180,000 to provide monthly income for an additional 15 years during the dependency period. So a total of $204,000 to meet the monthly goal of $4,500 during the readjustment and dependency. Now, if she's going to make some money off of that pile of money, well, she's gone. So, but if we consider the time value of money, we don't need the full $204,000 because maybe she'll make 5% per year on it. Also, if she takes inflation into account, she's got to increase the amount of life insurance just to maintain purchasing power of the benefits. But she can ignore both the present value, at least this is what it's telling us, and future value and future inflation if she assumes that they offset each other. So if we're going to say, look, maybe inflation is going to be 4% per year, because right now it's pretty horrible, right? And let's just assume that we can invest it in a way that keeps pace with inflation, and let's call it a day. And fine, let's just do that. So this assumption builds into the life insurance program an automatic hedge, which is great. So if Scott is currently in the labor force and plans to continue working, there's no need to provide additional income during the blackout period. At least that's what we're going with. I mean, we could do a more detailed cash flow analysis and identify how much of their current expenses are really, truly related to that kid. Anyways, Scott's going to be on his own during that blackout period. In reality, you might still want to provide some cushion. So another thing to consider is retirement income. Now, Scott's going to receive Social Security retirement benefits and a lifetime pension from his employer. He's also got his own IRA that's going to provide some additional retirement income. And Jennifer believes that Scott's retirement income will be sufficient. In reality, you would do more detailed math to make sure that Scott would end up in the same financial position as they would have had they both survived till their expected ages. For special needs, Jennifer would like the mortgage to be paid off, which is awesome. And the present mortgage value is $200,000. That's really going to help a lot. She also wants to establish an emergency fund of $50,000 and an educational fund for her son of $150,000. So her total special needs for the mortgage, emergency fund, and education fund will be $400,000. So that's really pretty awesome because, if they need $4,500 a month before considering income to cover expenses, now we don't have to worry about using any of Scott's wages to pay for the mortgage. We don't have to use any of his wages to cover college. So total special needs of $400,000. But then we need to determine how much of their existing assets can be used to satisfy needs. But before we get there, let's just tally up all these life insurance needs. So we already talked about the estate clearance fund. That's that $35,000 already covered it. And then the readjustment period, the dependency period, came to $204,000. We weren't going to provide any ongoing life income to the surviving spouse or any retirement income. We said he's going to be fine. And then we get to the special needs, the mortgage fund, the emergency fund, the college education fund, total special needs $400,000. So all in, without considering any of her other assets or their other life insurance that they have in place, life insurance needs $639,000. Then we bring into play assets. So let's look at the description of what they have for assets. Jennifer has a checking account and personal savings in the amount of $10,000. She owns several investments with a current market value of $35,000 and has an IRA with a balance of $20,000 and $40,000 in a 401k. She also has $60,000 worth of group life insurance at work, and so total financial assets that are available after her death that are technically in her name, not his, $165,000. We're not counting his assets. Total family needs are $639,000, but her current financial assets aren't enough to cover the $639,000, so she needs an additional $474,000 worth of life insurance. So that's this example, and there are plenty more. And this website, lifehappens.org, offers calculators that help you figure out, similar to this, what a person's life insurance needs are. So this approach, the needs approach, is superior to the human life value approach because it's a far more tailored method of determining a family's needs and has a much higher chance of arriving at a figure that will be far more appropriate for the survivors than if you just use the back of the envelope method.